Yes, many thanks for the invitation to attend the anniversary celebration 25 years Latvian Association of SOS Children's Village. I feel greatly honored to be able to participate in your anniversary celebration and to be allowed to speak here in the impressive Riga National Library. I was requested to present a talk on the topic quality in alternative care. I would like to give you some insight into our SOS longitudinal study. Although this is not explicitly an investigation in quality, I can illustrate very well how the youth themselves rate and evaluate the accommodation and the support they received in the SOS Children's Village home, based on the results of our questionnaires and interviews with young people who are living in residential care or have lived there. Above all, I would like to let you hear what young people in care and care leavers think about residential care in Germany, because they are the experts on this topic. What do they find good about residential care, and what still needs to be improved or further developed? Could you please turn to the next slide? Here we go. Okay, thank you. My talk is divided into 4 parts. For an orientation and categorization of alternative care in Germany, I would first like to present some facts and figures about our childcare system and some of the actual developments in Germany. Then I will briefly present our SOS longitudinal study with the title, Preparing Young People on Their Way to Independence. What are our research questions? Which methods do we use? Whom do we ask? And what does our database look like? The Quality for Children standards serve as a heuristic for questions about the quality of residential care. Since our study contains many of the topics named here, like relationship, belonging, participation, and so on, our study results can be placed in relation to the standards. Therefore, I would like to approach the question of how our young people evaluate the quality of residential care in the SOS Children's Villages based on our data. The first point, alternative care in Germany. Germany has a good legal foundation of alternative care, the so-called Youth Welfare Law. It's the Book 8 of the German Social Code. Family support interventions are presented in the form of a catalogue of social pedagogic services in the code. Although the child is central to these services, the person with parental responsibility has the legal entitlement to the service. 2 forms of alternative care are differentiated: foster care and residential care, and both forms are equally justified and offer temporary care or a permanent form of living. 2 fundamentally different forms of foster care exist: the temporary care, when parents are temporarily not available or during crises and emergencies, and permanent foster care, in which children come into care to achieve a long-term perspective. Residential care can also be for a short period or long-term. It offers many different types of care placements or residential locations in Germany. Large facilities with several groups, children's villages, small individual facilities running in shifts, or continuous care in surroundings familiar to families. There are also so-called other forms of supported living, which include shared housing, apartments for young people, and supported individual accommodations. Germany has an excellent alternative care database. We have our own institution for statistics on child and youth welfare, which analyzes the data of the Statistical Federal Office for Child and Youth Welfare and produces a report for the family services every year. This constitutes the foundation for the facts and figures presented here. As you can see, there are considerably more children in residential care than in full-time foster care in Germany. The statistics show that the older children are in residential care. They are just 14 when they come into care, on average double as old as the children in foster care. As already mentioned, care can consist of a temporary or a long-term form of living. The duration of residential care, an average of 21 months, is considerably shorter than full-time foster care. Although there have been many attempts to put more children in foster care than in residential care in Germany during the past years, the situation has not essentially changed. This is not only because it's not easy to find suitable foster parents, but also because residential care in Germany has a good reputation in comparison to other countries. It is accepted at all social levels and is highly recognized in specialist debates as development-stimulating form of accommodation. Due to various legal reforms and specialist quality initiatives, residential care has been further developed during the past years. The development in residential care includes differentiation of facilities, the construction of small homes close to home-based placements and care similar to family situation, improvement in post-care supervision, and a fundamental development towards decentralization and flexibility. In the pictures you can see two SOS facilities in Germany. The upper one shows the SOS Children's Village Youth House in Kaiserslautern. The lower one shows a house in the SOS Children's Village in Worpswede, in the north of Germany. The youth house above is a terrace house in the middle of a residential area in Kaiserslautern containing two youth groups with up to 9 youth, aged 12, up to the age until they move out. The house below is part of the children's village located outside the town with 5 children's village families, some residential groups, a kindergarten, and so on. I visited both places during the past months and gained a personal impression of the different forms of accommodation in SOS children's villages. I was very impressed by how intimately the groups and the families interact. The houses are very individual and cosily furnished and convey a familiar atmosphere. Although there have been a lot of development in residential care, there is still need for advancement. From 2019 to 2021, there was a big federal initiative in Germany called Future Forum on Residential Care, funded by the German Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. Within the framework of the Future Forum, central development needs and structural features of successful residential care were elaborated and publicly discussed. For this purpose, knowledge, assessment and positions of professionals and residents, practitioners and academics were compiled and discussed. The expert paper shown here highlights fundamental requirements for the advancement of residential child and youth care in Germany. Building on numerous discussions, participatory workshops, documented forums and expert reports that were held and elaborated in the context of the Future Forum, the paper addresses key issues and deepens future impulses for the further development of residential care. For example, ensuring that the fundamental rights of children and young people and the social rights of young individuals and their parents are upheld. Shaping residential care as a place for enabling non-discriminatory participation of young people in the social and institutional environment of growing up. Conceptualizing residential care as a facility for enabling educational and developmental processes. Enforcing inclusive residential care for young individuals with disabilities, empowering self-advocacy in residential care, and much more. What about foster care in Germany? I am not an expert in foster care, but from our interviews, we can have a small impression of the experiences our care leaders with foster care. Agreement seems to prevail in the international specialist discussion that the foster family compared to a facility is generally the better form of accommodation for children and youth. Both forms are equally recognized in Germany, and both forms are accepted if they offer the children a high quality of supported based on children's rights and needs. In specialist discussions, as well as by children and youth, foster care is sometimes viewed critically. The setting alone isn't a guarantee for the best accommodation. Our research also indicates that foster families are not always the best choice. Although the data concerning the accommodation of children in care before they came to SOS is not complete, our study will demonstrate that about every fifth young person lived in a foster family for at least 3 months before coming to SOS. Unfortunately, we cannot say how many foster families the children lived before moving to SMS. We also cannot say how long they stayed with each one and why the foster relationship ended. We do not explicitly ask the young people how they judged their foster accommodations. In some interviews, although, the caregivers related how they have experienced their time in foster care during their biographical accounts. Some of the caregivers were interviewed told in retrospect about a lot of changes and a real odyssey of accommodations until they arrived at SOS. In the following, I would like to give the example of 2 caregivers who reported interrupted care processes in their experiences in foster families. Laura related that she, among other things, was in several foster homes and above all didn't have good experiences in the last one. I was in about 3-4 foster families in a children's home and am now in SOS Children's Village. That was 6 stations for sure. I actually came to SOS Children's Village because it unfortunately didn't work out in one foster family. And since there were difficulties and after 10 years I said for my part, this can't go on. The foster family kept taking in more children and they were only concerned with their own problems and they finally just completely ignored me. Valentina found that her time in the foster family was good, but cannot explain why it didn't work out. She only really felt comfortable and at home for the first time in the SOS Children's Village. I came to a foster family when I was 2. It was actually okay, and then somehow, I don't know why, for some reason it didn't work out. Then when I was 6, I was in a children's home for a year. That was not so great. And then when I was 7, I came to the Children's Village. From the very beginning, I felt directly like home and it felt different than at the other places. I immediately knew that I had arrived. As we see, the experiences in and with a foster family are very individual and can differ greatly. One foster family can support the development of the children and youth and be a good place to grow up, and the other family cannot. However, there's no guarantee that this kind of accommodation is always better than residential care. Now I would like to discuss point 2, our SOS longitudinal study. The goal of our study is to examine individual development processes and transitions over a longer time and to continually improve our pedagogical practice on site in the homes based on this empirical basis. The study covers a long time span, that is growing up in foster care, in care from the age of 12, preparing for transition into living independently, gaining ground as a young adult, and thriving up to the age of 30. The long-term perspective ranges from adolescence and alternative care to young adulthood out of care. We examine different aspects of life on the individual and social levels, as well as the effectiveness of the care system. Here you can see some of our research questions. That is, what does it mean for young people not to grow up in their own families? What do they experience growing up in an institution? What do young people need to be able to lead a life according to their own conceptions? We asked about different life spheres. social relationships, education, health and well-being, burdens and life satisfaction, and different aspects of the support they receive. We have conducted our longitudinal study in 29 SOS facilities in Germany since 2014. The study is characterized by its broad field access, multiple perspectives, and mixture of methods. Quantitative questionnaires were regularly filled out by residents, the main caregiver, and caregivers every 2 years. We employed a wide range of instruments and methods to cover the topics person, relationship, and environment. Qualitative interviews, each with a partial sample, are conducted in years between the questionnaires. In these detailed interviews, the young people are encouraged to consciously consider and reflect on their own development and life situation. Both quantitative and qualitative methods are applied to evaluate the data, to interrelate the individual results, and to observe the research outcomes from different perspectives. Let us have a brief look at our database. Whom do we ask, and how many young people have been included in the SOS study so far? We interviewed all children and youth from the age of 12 who have been living in SOS residential facilities, as well as their main caregiver and individuals formerly in our care who participated in the study. We have questioned a total of 1,500 individuals so far, nearly 1,200 in our care, and more than 350 caregivers. Almost 60% were between the ages of 12 and 14 during the initial survey, 36.4% between 15 and 18, and 6% were over 18. There was an equal number of boys and girls in our care. The participating caregivers were 19.8 years old on average. The portion of females among the caregivers we were able to reach is considerably higher at 67%. Now we have arrived at point 3, the quality of out-of-home care. The Quality for Children standards provide a good referential framework for the international and national discussions on quality. These derived from the initiative and cooperation among 3 international child care organizations: International Foster Care Organization, the SOS Children's Villages, and the Fédération Internationale des Communes Éducatives. These standards have been developed with the participation of children and young adults, parents, caregivers, extended family members, lawyers, and government representatives from across Europe. They aim at ensuring and improving children's and young adults' development opportunities in out-of-home childcare all over Europe, and form a valuable contribution and an important further step towards the harmonization of the childcare systems in Europe. The Q4C standards have been developed in the framework of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Each of the standards reflect one or more of the core principles on the UN CRC: non-discrimination, devotion, the best interests of the child, the right to live in development, and the respect for the children's views. Q4C differentiates among 3 areas and formulates the appropriate standards for each: the decision-making and admission process, the caretaking process, and the care-leaving process. Each standard will be explained in more detail. For example, Standard 12, the child is cared for in appropriate living conditions, states: the living standards and infrastructure of the care institution satisfy the child's needs in respect to comfort, security, healthy living conditions, and uninhibited access to education and to the community. It would certainly be worthwhile to examine all areas individually. This, however, would exceed our allotted time limit. In the following, I would like to elucidate the caretaking process and some of the standards that apply. 8 quality standards have been formulated for the caretaking process. These standards name topics and aspects which we cover in our study. For example, Standard 8, the child maintains contact with his or her family of origin, is related to our results to the topic belonging. Standard 10, The caregiver relationship with the child is based on understanding and respect. We also asked the young people about their caregivers' relationships. A further topic in our questionnaire is participation. What do the young people say about being empowered to actively participate in making decisions that directly affect their lives? The fourth topic is education, and the last one is preparing for independent living. Let me present our findings now. Let us have a look at what the young people in care and care leavers say about the topics in our study, and which indicates these can give concerning the quality of accommodations in SOS facilities. Let's start with the topic belonging. Q4C Standard 8 states, the child maintains contact with his or family of origin. Our interviews show that some of the young people have regular contact and others, for very different reasons, have hardly any or no contact. For example, Nico. In retrospect, he reported regular meetings with his mother in the children's village and later with his mother at home. She visited us regularly in the children's village, and when I got older, we could drive there where she lived. In contrast, Valentina told us that she hardly had any contact with her mother. In the children's village, the first year when I lived there, my mother came by, and then we were in care planning discussion, and she was also there. But really active contact never actually existed. Our interviews show whether and how often the young people have contact with their biological parents during their time in SOS care differs greatly and depends on a number of factors. In our study, we not only asked the young people in care about their contacts with their families of origin, but also where they felt they belonged and at home. Some demonstrated a double allegiance to both the SOS and their biological families. Jimmy's caregiver reported, Jimmy has 2 homes. I believe that being here is okay for him, and that it is a bit of an everyday nest and also a protective place. And then there's the great longing for his family, his biological family, for him when he compares them with one another. The family is at least as important, yes. About 1/3 of the young people in SOS care feel at home both in the children's village as well as in their own families. This double allegiance makes it easier for them to profit from their time in SOS facility. Their well-being and life satisfaction are comparatively strongly formed. They regard the protective system positively. Let's have a look at the caregiver's relationship. Q4C Standard 10 states the caregiver's relationship with the child is based on understanding and respect. A central topic of our longitudinal study is the young people's social relationships and supportive resources. This area is highlighted in all our investigative instruments. Both the questionnaires and the interviews contain a number of questions on these topics. What do the study participants tell us about the caregiver's relationship? Let's hear what Laura said in an interview. I really value the children's village a lot because the caregivers were the first ones in my whole life who appreciated me and my strengths, my characteristics, my character, and that actually changed my whole worldview and that of myself. That was crazy. Thorsten also reported very positively about his relationship with the caregivers. They never said, you did that and that wrong. And they never scolded, but had a really good and neutral view of what had happened and then looked for a solution. And we always had fun, and yes, one simply felt protected. And also that somebody really wants to things go well for one in the future. Based on our data, we can say trusting relationships are a very important resource during and after the time in care and give young people the needed support to enable them to master the transition into independence and to gain a foothold in their adult lives. 60% of the youth in the SOS Children's Village families or group homes say that they have a trusting relationship, at least one of their caregivers. For 32, this is just partly the case. Particularly those young people who have experienced a close belonging with the children's village and their role models find leaving the community difficult. It constitutes a severe break in the life of the SOS care leavers. That's why a social network is an important source of support during transition into autonomy. A sustainable social network and a sustainable social network facilitates the transition into independence when reliable contacts in this children's village fall away. Especially young care leavers often find it difficult to enter into relationships due to their previous experiences and accompanying psychosocial burdens. The creation and maintenance of strong networks therefore often constitutes a great challenge for the young people. Together with the participants, we generated a network map to determine the current nature of the care leavers' social networks during the interviews. In the interviews, care leavers primarily describe small networks with selected persons who are considered as resources. These usually consist of fewer than 15 people, including their own families and persons within the care system. A friend is described as important or very important in their lives by a large portion of the care leavers. It is stressful if no friends are available, especially if the ability to build up sustainable relationships is lacking. A good trusting relationship to at least one dedicated professional carer is described as essential for a successful transition in the period thereafter. Above all, the children's village mother remains an essential role model even after moving out. The total results of our evaluations of the broad field of relationship building in the SOS facilities have produced recommendations in two closely related fields. Within the context of leaving, care professionals are confronted with the following tasks. First, strengthen the young people's network competence early. Care leavers need support in the process of becoming emotionally independent and in creating a sustainable external peer network while they are still in care. Second, professionals must consciously shape the process of letting go. The process of becoming independent and the imminent discharge from residential care into an autonomous life requires a conscious framing of the change in the care relationship. This primarily involves perceiving and accepting the ambivalence between attachment and letting go. Now we've come to the topic education. What has our study taught us about our subjects, educational processes, and school leaving certificates? 9% of the SOS care leavers had no school leaving certificate. 9% attended a school for children with special needs. 1/3 received a graduation certificate of secondary education, and nearly the same percentage received a general certificate of secondary education. 11 achieved a university entrance qualification. In contrast, 50% of the same-aged peers achieved their A-levels or advanced technical college entrance qualification. Here there are big differences in educational levels. SOS residents achieved distinctly lower school leaving certificates compared to same-aged youth without youth welfare experiences. This decreases their chances of occupational success and social participation. Q4C Standard 12 states the child is cared for in an appropriate living condition, including uninhibited access to education. Our care leavers interviews demonstrate how important and promising it is to promote and support young people in their education as much as possible. Carolyn's description. My children's village mother often gave me a shove. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I am today. I got relatively good A-level results. If she hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't have completed it at all. When asked what motivated her study desire, Valentina said, that was also a little bit the children's village mother, because I always said that I wouldn't get into medical school, and she said, yes, you will manage, try to get your A-levels. Even if you don't get it, you will still have completed your specialist training. Then she showed me the way that I should do it and finish it. And then she said, yes, you will succeed. You only have to believe it, and we will help you. A good combination of confidence and support by a trusted person who serves as a role model and individual encouragement can help the person in care to increase his or her attention to education and rise above himself. Such intensive support still isn't everywhere and continuously the case. Therefore, SOS in Germany, in its strategy, pursues the goal to further develop and expand its supportive programs and educational support of the young people in our care. Standard 11 focuses on the topic participation. The child is empowered to actively participate in making decisions that directly affect his or her life. In both the questionnaires and the interviews, we asked the young people about their possibilities to participate in SOS. There were very different answers to this topic. When it was about contacts to the family of origin, a majority of the young people in care felt they were well involved. 84% said that they were able to take part in decision-making or that they were asked their opinion. Carolyn reported in her interview, "My children's village mother always left it open. She said, if you want to see them, the family of origin, don't worry, then we'll immediately arrange a meeting. But then if I said no, I don't want to see them, that was also okay. She left it completely up to me, and then we usually settled it so that I only met my biological mother during the health planning discussions." The results of the questions concerning group regulations were somewhat different. In the questionnaire, 3/4 of the young people in care marked they were involved in setting up group regulations and could partake in decision-making or were asked their opinions on this topic. 17% felt that they had only been informed about the regulations. The other 8% felt that they hadn't been involved at all and were not acquainted with this kind of shared decision-making. In her interview, Chiara reported she found that the group regulations were no longer appropriate with increasing age and their participants' level of personal responsibility, and that she finally even wanted to move out because of them. I finally really had problems with the group regulations, and that was the reason why I wanted to get away from here. Participation is a central operating principle in youth welfare, in the daily pedagogic routine, in the health planning procedure, and in all preparations and decisions surrounding the transition period. Over half of the young people in our care are satisfied or very satisfied with the participatory opportunities in the SOS facilities. 30.5% are indifferent or undecided, and only nearly 8% are not at all satisfied. Only 38% of the care leavers reported that they hadn't or had not sufficiently been involved in their passage into self-determination. We can see the young people find that the opportunities for participation in our facilities haven't been satisfactorily implemented in every area. Our results obviously show that there's a great deal of room for involvement concerning the topic participation in the SOS Children's Village. Preparation for independent living. Q4C Standard 14 states the child or young adult is continuously prepared for independent living. The question of how young people are prepared for independence is a focus in our questionnaires and interviews. There are many detailed passages in the face-to-face interviews. The young people relate how they experience the preparation and name different ways in which it is implemented in the SOS facilities, for example, as casual preparation in the everyday routine. Carolyn reported, "My children's village mother taught us that early. That's a lot what she taught me. There's also, washing clothes, washing up, cooking, things like that, dealing with money, which is really existential. That was subliminal from the very beginning, simply part of the upbringing." Second, preparation in special group programs, like Tyrek said in his interview. There was a group every Tuesday from 3 to 5, and all sorts of things like contracts and so on were explained in lectures. A third way of preparation is in special living programs. Ines said, "In the shared living quarters for youth in which I lived, there were 2 apartments. One was available to learn how to live independently and to be more independent, and where all money was provided, whether for groceries, to see if you were able to move out." Nearly 60% of care leavers reported that they had been well prepared to move out during their stay in the children's village. The analysis of the interviews pointed out that the care leavers feel well prepared for their everyday practical tasks like housekeeping, dealing with finances, and so on. We notice that in the preparatory and becoming independent phases during residential care in the SOS Children's Village, we must pay more attention to psychosocial factors. For a successful transition, young people need not only practical life competencies and the ability to organize their everyday lives, they also require an internal willingness to move out, mental stability to be able to deal with the situation, and reliable, supportive social relationships. Professional supervision before, during, and after moving out is also important. This should encompass a wide range of supportive measures and be tailored to the individual needs. Let us now summarize our findings from face-to-face interviews with care leavers. We asked the young adults how they look back on their time in care and the influence it had on their personal development. They talked about being stabilized in their life course and having gained competence for living on their own. They also felt protected from social isolation and bad influences from other persons. They became experienced in living in a community, gained self-confidence, and received assistance in coping with their past history. They felt enabled to attend school regularly and attained qualifications to help them manage the transition into vocational training or study. The interviews reported an overall positive influence while growing up in care. Becoming an adult means learning to understand experiences from one's previous life and being able to consolidate them into a consistent and coherent image. Among care leavers, this means looking back on their time in the youth welfare facility. This provides evidence of how well the time in care can be integrated into one's biography. Our questionnaire had 17 items concerning the residential care in retrospect. The participants were requested to indicate to what extent they agreed with the individual statements. Factor analysis of the care leavers' answers identified 5 basic attitudes. SOS as rescue. Characteristic for this basic attitude is conviction that life without SOS would have been worse and that it was good to have been in the facility. The residential care exerted a sustained influence on the care leavers. They consider it the best thing that ever happened to them. SOS as a chance. Care leavers who have the basic attitude are of the opinion that their time in the SOS facility gave their lives a positive twist of fate and opened up possibilities for them that they otherwise wouldn't have had. Their experience in the care facility is part of these young adults' biographies and still plays an important role. SOS as normality. Characteristic of this basic attitude is that the care leavers concerned treat their growing up in an institution quite openly and tell not only close friends that they lived in a SOS facility. SOS as a burden. Care leavers with a basic attitude have had experiences that still burden them because of or during their residential stay. They report that people treat them differently when they find out that they grew up in an SOS facility or even used their residence in a care facility against them. SOS as a blamish. This basic attitude is typical of young adults for whom it is unpleasant to have lived in a SOS facility. They don't want anyone to find it out. At the same time, these care leavers are still sad and angry that they couldn't grow up in their own families. We also found that the less the young people rate their time in youth care facility as a burden today, the more satisfied they are with their present life situations. In contrast, one can assume that past experiences that haven't been sufficiently dealt with affect the present negatively. If the time in the SOS facility is perceived as normal, then is This is accompanied by a higher degree of life satisfaction. With the help of scales, we were able to identify how strongly pronounced the basic attitude is for all participants. 1 like hardly, 2 4 extremely. The bar chart shows the average value of each basic attitude among all participants. SOS as rescue, as a chance, as normality achieve the highest means. Agreement with these individual statements is higher on average than for SOS as a burden or a blemish. Those were some of the data from the SOS longitudinal study. I hope the presented results from our study could give you some insight in what young people think about their housing in the SOS Children's Village, how they evaluate different topics about quality, and where there remains potential for improvement and need for further development. In conclusion, I would briefly summarize the results. Belonging. Double allegiance makes it easier for young people in care to profit from their time in the SOS facility. Our questionnaire investigation shows that their well-being and life satisfaction are comparatively strongly informed. Trusting and reliable relationships are a very important resource during their time in care and give young people the needed support to enable them to master the transition into independence. For many, the SOS Children's Village mother is an important role model, even after leaving care. While they are still in care, caregivers require support in creating sustainable external networks. Competency networking should be strengthened as early as possible. In comparison to the general population, the young people in SOS complete their education with low school leaving certificates. A good combination of confidence and support by a trusted person and individual encouragement can help the person in care to increase their educational efforts and expanding their capacities. But such intensive support isn't still possible always and everywhere. Therefore, efforts in the area of education must be intensified. Participation is a central operating principle in youth welfare. Opportunities to participate in the facilities haven't yet been satisfactorily implemented in all areas and must urgently be further improved. We have been discussing this topic for years, but it seems to be necessary to focus it again and again. Preparation to independent living. The analysis of the interviews pointed out that there are different ways in which preparation is implemented in the SOS facilities. The caregivers feel well prepared for everyday tasks, like housekeeping and so on. We noticed that we must pay more attention to psychosocial factors in the preparatory and becoming independent phases during residential care in SOS Children's Village. The supportive measures must be designed individually and according to need. Both participation and guidance are required for a successful transition. Thank you very much for your attention.